always had a nice house. It was a big house. The house on Atlanta and Warren was a 2-story house. The one, it burned down. That house he took us to after that on South Boulevard was a 2-story house.
But you know why? That's the way he was raised.
That's why I'm saying something in his makeup, something in his DNA would have his family being able to spread. Everybody had a room. She had her own room. I don't remember when she didn't have her own room. Even if the boys slept together.
Right.
We understood as boys that this girl was different.
Right.
That this little girl was special here. And don't let nobody do this to you. So first, we couldn't fight each other. That was a no-no.
We could call each other a lie.
In this house.
We had to respect them enough not to
You
talk.
had to learn respect at home with your brother and sister.
Abner tells me stories about your dad going down to getting people out of jail or black people to be accompanied. Really?
All the time.
Your house was a way station, a safe place?
They'd find a way to get in touch with him, especially if he knew them. He would go and bail them out, you know, if they said, I'm going to pay you, or can you help me? Most of the time he just did it with his influence, and the people would go on that. He just had, God gave him a favor with the people.
Right.
And he could do that. He did that, I guess, up until he got where he could not. Finally, Judge O'Brien.
Judge
O'Brien. The house that he bought, Judge O'Brien, he had paid the house note to Judge O'Brien. And Judge O'Brien told him, if I were you, I would get all these people out of jail. They don't respect you. They get back in trouble, you know. And so you just shouldn't do that. Let some of them, you know, kind of rest in jail. And so he kind of lightened up with that, you know. But, yeah, he has gotten many
But the
people out
preachers is who I was really telling you about. And so many times I remember they'd be on the way to Memphis to going to church to our national meeting. And they'd be in pretty cars coming from California with new cars and so forth. And they'd be ministers, and they'd have their families with them. And they'd call my dad and let him know that they was in jail.
Good, sir.
There's the bishop.
Beautiful wife.
And
She's still beautiful, though.
No, it's really a follow-through. I had surgery almost a year ago, and I think they just like me to come by there and see my checkbook. The bad part about that is, I mean, the time-consuming part about it is it's that their office is in Duncanville.
Oh, my.
You can come out of Duncanville, but you can't go in. All the freeways and everything are torn up. So if you taking pictures, you just
just keep
somebody
talking.
asked you after church what?
That works, y'all.
Somebody asked you
by.
after church what?
after church said, Bishop, you introduced that young lady and said she was beautiful. Said, you just know folk from everywhere. I said, isn't she beautiful?
You don't have to know previously to know
First
that.
time I ever saw her, but she is beautiful.
She is a beautiful. And then
While I got y'all sitting there, I done told them so many stories about how you went to Lexington, Mississippi, or Saints Industrial, we used to call it, and how when you came back, you was a different fellow. Do you remember any of that, what they did to you?
My mother and father, particularly my father, always, every one of his children was special to him. He knew what Maxine was about, what Neaul was about, and they always, where I was concerned, felt like that I had a religious innermost being that the other kids didn't have. My oldest brother was interested in being a doctor, and Sam was a football star, All-American.
Football, baseball.
Baseball, he played in the Brooklyn Dodgers organization.
Right.
All right, when we started, I must have been about 13, maybe 14, and I was the one who went to church most. So they decided that it would
You
be...
needed too much.
I knew it was going to come out if I got them together.
the best thing to do is send him to school, to the boarding school, and so nobody's gonna, nobody's gonna be interested in going in the family anyway, but him, and maybe it will help influence the behavior of the other kids. So I went to Lexington. We called it Saints Industrial School. It was it was an undergraduate school.
Dr. Mallory.
Dr. Arena C. Mallory was the president, one of the most brilliant women that I ever met. She was a graduate of Chicago University with master's and a doctorate from the University of Chicago. She came from a family of high achievers. Her brother Frank Mallory was a pilot. He was killed in World War II. And when I went to Saints Industrial School, they were very high on good manners, politeness, fellows knowing how to be around young ladies and yet knowing how to respect yourself and respect them. And so when I came back home, when I left home, we were all, everybody in our family was from 2.5 to 3 years apart in age levels. That's why Abner had such a great, difficult time when he was growing up, because everybody in the family was older than him. So he had to pick out who he was going to spend his time with. I was the closest one to his age, and I'm 6 years his senior. So, and my brother Sam was like 12 or 13 years his senior. But anyway, when I stepped off that train coming back from Lexington, Mississippi, I was a different person because of the mannerisms that I had absorbed. If there was a young lady or a woman in presence in our presence, we definitely gave attention to her. I opened the doors for anybody getting in a car. A woman, when we were going into a building, I rushed to open the door. I pulled the chair out when we were seated to eat. And these things, little things, seemingly, to the family, and they were, but it made me a different person in terms of my relationship with other persons. I told my daughters yesterday, they helped me in my finances because they're both grown now, and whatever you are and whatever you have, your family is, you have to be involved. But I told them it does not matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much education you have. The thing that endears you to other people is your lifestyle. It's your style, the way you handle yourself, the way you do things. Even if you are all-pro athlete, people relate to you because of the way that you relate to them. So that's the way I became sensitive to my surroundings when I was in Lexington, Mississippi.
I have a question for you. Abner and I were talking yesterday, and he mentioned your great-grandfather. Not grandfather in July? Is it great or great?
He knew July.
Well, he mentioned that he went to college, Wiley College.
He's a teacher.
And I told Abner yesterday, I said, I'm a bird dog. You give me a hint of some little story, I'm going to chase it to find out. So I talked to the president's office at Wiley yesterday.
Did you?
And first I was amazed when I went onto their site that there was a movie made about a professor there called The Great Debaters. You familiar with this story?
Sure.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And so
His son taught it.
I called Everett up. I said, I must live in a cocoon. I don't know anything about these stories. In July I went there. How did that work out? Or how did?
But my father, of course, his name was July Haynes because he was born on the 1st of July. My grandfather. And when we knew Grandpa, we called him, he would always be trying to come to our rescue. If my mother or my father was whipping me, Grandpa would come from across the street, and we'd say, "Hey, Mommy, here come Grandpa. You got to stop hitting me." And he would stop them. That's the way grandfathers were. But we admired him because he was an elegant man. You never, if he was in bed, you never saw him, dressed in any way except he was supposed to be. He wore his pajamas and robe. When he came, we went and knocked on his door if he was in bed or not feeling well. When he walked, everybody in the entrance knew that was July Haynes. He walked with his head up and his chest out, and I never saw him stumble.
Did he ever talk about Isaac or his dad?
No. If he did with the older members of the family.
We were trying to figure out that Abner's shared his book with me, and we're going over it, that Isaac left South Carolina in 1860. And my team, Everett and others, are going, okay, what was going on in South Carolina in 1860? Beginning of the Civil War, you're right there at the edge. How did Isaac get a ticket out of town? And how did he maneuver himself?
I don't know how Grandpa Isaac did that, but the Hayneses, from my relationship with Grandpa July and my own father, these people were believers in whatever they felt like they wanted to do, they could do. When my grandfather graduated from college, we didn't know anybody but him that had gone to college. There weren't that many African Americans who went to college, let alone graduated. And he was the chairman of the trustee board or the school board. In those days, schools were segregated, so they had a black school superintendent. His name was July Haynes.
That's right.
And you had to have some pride and admiration, even if your scope or frame of reference was limited. You had to understand when you went somewhere the respect that your parents received from, everybody in the community that they know. I can remember when I was taking algebra in high school, and the teacher, Professor Briscoe, was always also the coach. If he put a problem on the board to demonstrate to the class how it was supposed to be worked out, and there were guys and people in the class always who did not understand whatever it was you demonstrated. You know what he would say? Yeah, I know you can do that. Abner Haynes or Butch Haynes can do this. Butch was a little boy in school. He was just a kid. But that was the kind of atmosphere that he grew up in. And his brothers and sisters, we just, that was the kind of atmosphere that our parents projected for us.
You think Isaac and July and you all had the same
Grandpa
spirit?
Isaac had to have some influence. How can you leave?
How July gonna get it if he ain't got no leader?
I mean, you cannot live in a house with a number of people without the kinds of behavior patterns that they deploy falling on you.
Right.
You cannot be a person who says, I'm gonna be nothing, when everybody else in the house is
something.
It's something. Yeah. And my father we had family meeting.
That's right.
Family meeting.
That's right.
And
people don't believe that, man, when I tell them.
She was almost a baby. She is, I think it's a couple of years between she and Abner. Everybody in the family had to have some goal that you were to reach.
And they would make me stand up and they would listen.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying something
He's a baby,
important.
but he still had to have some goal.
Right.
And that just,
I can remember he was good at drawing at houses and architecture and things.
Yeah, he
and
was.
I'm good at drawing myself, but I had never gotten into drawing buildings and houses and things. I remember my daddy telling him, I want you to draw me a house, design me a house, and do a floor plan. I was jealous. I
that
started
time.
drawing. And I want him to know I can do that too.
That's right.
So another thing that made us push was
The competition,
the
maybe?
competition
Yeah.
between us. And he set a great standard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things he do for me is I could depend on him to play ball with. He wasn't so tired, and he played on the high school team at the age when I start kind of waking up. He was their leader. He was their quarterback. And how far is practice? Where he practiced, it's just down the street from me. The park is right over here. And so I can go watch my brother practice every day. And I've been watching Tim, all of them that I could remember come before him. But he fit me just perfect. And we all had aspirations for him. We knew he was going to be something special.
He was brilliant. as
Okay,
a
we
kid.
just didn't know what. But he could draw. He was one of the greatest speakers that ever
Yeah.
came through Denton.
Yeah.
He was the valedictorian of his class, even. And so we were so proud of him. He even figured out a school that was integrated he could go to in Denver. And it wasn't that, I remember at the family, it ain't that far away. And I can go to the University of Denver and get home. There was a train that would go to Denton, to Denver, literally. And it was amazing. I'm sitting up watching. I remember his little corduroy red jacket when he was trying to dress up in the little plaid tie. And we were so proud of him because somebody from Denton was doing something, but nobody black doing nothing in Denton that we could see.
Right, right.
And then he'd bring his books home with him where he'd show me, this is his picture doing stuff with kids. And it just messed.
That's why I started playing tennis because of him.
Did you tell him that you were an art teacher when you were?
What do you think is the biggest difference when you all were growing up versus kids that are growing up now?
The family relationship. My father and mother, they were successful in what they did. He was a bishop too. And I mean, in those days, you didn't get to be a bishop. Or he was a superintendent first. That's it.
Right.
And you didn't even get to be a superintendent unless you was like super special.
Right.
And he had the largest district in Texas. He had like 40 churches, which there were jurisdictions or dioceses in other states that didn't have 40 churches in the whole state.
Right.
And he had that many in his. He was the chairman of the Elders Council, so he had all kinds of things to relate to for the success or for the attempt at what he wanted to do. And
He was an overseer, whatever that is.
overseer, and then he became bishop. I have been blessed now to be the bishop of the largest, in fact, the largest ecclesiastical jurisdiction in the Church of God in Christ. We got like 6 million people.
Wow.
And we got, well, I said we had like 140 churches in Haiti. I was in Haiti last year, and the earthquake has diminished a number of them. But our first contribution to Haiti following the earthquake was over $1 million. Wow. We sent $27,000 from here.
Wow.
But, and I guess I'm going to have to get out of here because I don't want that later.
How'd y'all get this church? How'd your daddy get this church?
Well, he had bought 10 acres of property on
Luke 12.
Loop 12. And I was on the trustee board, the youngest member of the trustee board. And he kept talking about how he wanted his church before he went to sleep. And he was in his, mid-70s then. And so it kept ringing in my head, wouldn't it be something special if we found a building that could house our convention and do what he wanted to do, and that meant we would be able to occupy it immediately. And so from day one, I guess from day one, but from time to time, I would drive all through Oak Cliff. And I saw this church, but it didn't have a for sale sign on it. And I said to myself, that church is big enough to do what we want. I went to the bank one day to make a deposit, and one of the bankers one of the trustees at the bank, he was a trustee at the bank, at the Oak Cliff Bank.
Over on Zangs.
Huh?
Over on Zangs.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Oak Cliff.
Zangs and what, it's on Zangs.
Zang and 12th?
Right, Zangs and 12.
Yes, sir.
And anyway, the officer at the bank and I knew each other, and when you know people, you talk about things, your family, what have you. And so I told him, he asked, how you doing, Reverend Haynes? I said, I'm doing okay. I said, I'm trying to find a place for my father's jurisdiction to worship. And I told him, you know, we had a number of over 300 churches. So he said, we have a church, and we're going to sell. And I said, well, I've looked at all the churches in Oak Cliff, and I haven't seen anything that was large enough except this church and the church down where was Apostle Murray brought.
Right there on Ann Arbor. We used to
Ann
be
Arbor
First
and the
Baptist.
freeway. And the minister was very well known. He was Caucasian, but he was Pentecostal, and he was very respected by all races. So anyway, when I mentioned that to him, he said, we got a church, we're going to sell it. I said, oh, no, that church is not for sale. It doesn't have a for sale sign. He said, I'm a trustee. The church is up for sale. And I said, I can't believe it. He said, this is the address, and this is the phone number. He said, I'm going to call them and tell them you're going to come by there and look at the church. Wow. They were not even showing the church. There was no sign. So I was very excited. I drove right here. They opened the door so graciously. And when they first took me to the chapel, said, this is basically our wedding chapel. We walked through the fellowship hall, showed me the kitchen and whatever. We remodeled and all that. The first 3 or 4 years that we had this church, the school used our cafeteria for feeding their children. Wow. We used our auditorium for their graduation exercises and all of the things that they didn't have, social things that they didn't have room enough to do at the school across the street. We let them use our classrooms and whatever. But anyway, when the young lady who was secretary opened that door, and I saw this sanctuary, this auditorium with its pews and carpeting and everything. We've changed the lights and whatever. But I said, you're gonna sell it? She says, it's already up for sale. We just haven't put a sign on it, and we haven't signed the listing, finalized the contract of listing it with a real estate broker. So I was so excited. When after I saw the church, it has baptistry and everything, I jumped in my car and drove to South Dallas. And I told my mother when I got in the house, I was just shaking. And so she said, what's wrong with you? And I told her. She said, well, you need to go tell your father. He's up in his office. And so I went and told him, I said, Papa, Dad, I found a church. It'll do for Saintsville right now. So we can obtain it, and we don't have to wait on what we build on Bronx Street. So he said, oh, ain't no church in Oak Cliff big enough for what what we intend is, and we've already bought 10 acres. We're going to build Saintsville out there. I said, I wish you would go and take. No, I don't have time. I've been to every one of them churches. So my mother came in, and she saw me and heard me pleading with him. And so she said, Dad, he's taken the trouble to go and find the building. Why don't you
It sounds just
drive
like,
out? Wow. My mother she was
it
sharp.
sounds just like.
She could do with him what she said, put on your vest. You don't have to put on your coat.
Wow.
And you and James go out there and look at the church. You don't have to buy it. You don't even have to like it, but go look at it. And so he grumbled all the way to the car. I drove him out here. And when he said, I've seen this church. I said, but have you seen inside? No, he had not. When we knocked on the door and came in, this was a Church of Christ. And the person, they were so gracious and friendly. So they took us through the fellowship hall and to the wedding chapel, even upstairs. They had a music room. We got a music room upstairs that the choir uses for conventions when it overflows the other one. And a band room and all, just everything that you would want if you were going to build the church and had the money to do so. So after the members had shown us all of the rest of the church, I said, now take him to the auditorium. And he came, the young man who was guiding us, opened the door and said, I understand you're a bishop. And my father said, yes. He said, well, Bishop, this is your palace right here. And when my father stepped inside that door and he looked, I have never seen him so impressed with anything. He looked all around, and I think he counted the lights in the ceiling. But he just stood there for, 2 minutes without saying a word. And finally, he looked at me. He didn't say anything to the other guy. He looked at me and said, this is it.
What year is that?
In 70, must have been 70.
34?
72.
No, it wasn't that far down. Because we acquired the property. Let me see. No, I came here in 79. You're right. It was farther back than that. I did have a copy of the contract if you
Maybe
need it.
70.
I got to
I'm
jump
thinking
you around.
72.
There was a black man in Denton. You mentioned Coach Briscoe. He was before Coach Briscoe.
Mr. Miller, Tennyson Miller.
Talk about Tennyson Miller.
Alfred Tennyson Miller.
Yes, sir.
A.T. Miller, we call him. We just call him Professor Miller.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Miller was probably the most intelligent person in terms of native intelligence that I had met, especially when I was going to school. We all honored him and looked to him like that. When he was called to Dallas to come and register for World War II, they gave you a test. He scored the highest test of any person who had
taken the test.
had taken the test. I did know the number because the people came back to Denton talking about Professor Miller scored. When he left Denton in the Army, they had put him in uniform before he left, and he had a squadron of men with him going to Fort Dix, New Jersey. A.T. Miller.
And he ended up in North Carolina Central
Yeah, and
running it.
he was probably the most versatile athlete that I ever knew. Miller could hit a golf ball. He could play softball, hit the softball over the fence and turn around on the left side and hit it over the right fence.
And was a genius in math, I heard.
Yeah, he was. He was our math teacher. And he was such a potent person at whatever he was and did that nobody disrespected A.T. Miller.
You remember that game you were telling us about? you were playing quarterback and y'all played in Denison.
In Denison. Now, we played in Denton.
Oh, y'all played in Denton.
Yeah.
Did you get caught on the 1 yard line?
We were tied for the conference championship. We played out at I think it was where the Broncos played.
Bronco Stadium.
Bronco Stadium. And in football then, you played, you played 60 minutes. You were
Both
defensive
ways.
and offensive. You went both ways. So I played defensive, safety, and halfback. So the score was tied, 7-7. It was almost the end of the game. And a man who later became one of my deacons when I went to Denison, pastor's son, Edward Butler, the All-State quarterback, was the quarterback for Denison.
Right.
And when they had gotten down to the 20-yard line, out 20. We were trying our best to make sure they didn't get in close enough to at least to kick a field goal. And he threw a pass on the play. I don't remember who knocked it down. I don't know if it remembers Chris, but one of our linebackers, he didn't knock the ball down. He just tipped it. Mm-hmm. And when he tipped it, you know how that is. It goes up, goes a little further. And when he tipped it, it put it right in my line, and I caught the ball. I intercepted the pass. And
Still running. You still running.
Still
And
running.
they got tired.
You still running. Let's say.
They was going in and you got an interception.
Yeah.
Huh?
They
had several All-State players on there. And Eddie Butler, the quarterback, was the 100-yard dash champion.
Yeah.
So you know what kind of time I had trying to
Not very
get
much.
behind.
You didn't have very much
Didn't have
time.
much.
But the point also, that this comes to my mind, all of my older brothers and sisters participated in athletics in school. They were good students. She played basketball. She was a good basketball player. They didn't like, she'd wear them long shorts. They didn't let girls wear, what you call that?
Short shorts.
Short shorts. But I went and saw every game she ever played. And she'd be mad all the time.
I'm going to have to leave.
Can I ask you a favor before you
I'd like to share
leave?
with you one story that I don't know if I've given this to the press, told anybody from the press before. I have seen Abner play and catch a ball or kick off 2 or 3 yards inside the goal line, in his own end zone, and run it back for touchdowns, 100 yards. In fact, one day we were at the Cotton Bowl, and I think they were playing New York, and they kicked off to him, and he ran the ball back for a touchdown. They called it back on a clipping penalty, and they kicked it off again, and he ran
Get back again.
He ran it back again. That's in the. But the greatest run that I have ever seen in my judgment, Abner make, was a 2-yard run.
I know.
2 yards. Tulsa, I believe it was, and North Texas were playing in an Eagle Stadium for the Missouri Valley Championship. And Tulsa had been, they had been taking it to the Eagles that day. And what's that guy's name? The fullback.
For us, Bill Gross, Deion Thet, Vernon Cole.
Now, Cole was the quarterback.
Ain't no telling who was it. Should have been Bill Gross.
It wasn't Gross. But anyway, I'll think of it while it's. Anyway, the fullback had broken through for the Eagles because Tulsa was like 7. It was 7-0. All right, when the fullback, he broke off tackle, made a 45-yard touchdown. So that meant that the score was 7-6, with Tulsa leading.
And time running out.
And time running out. It was like less than a minute to play.
That's right.
And so they North Texas lined up. Abner was playing flanker on this particular play because he was running back. He was deaf on that pitch out. And everybody in the stadium knew that some kind of way they were going to get the ball to Abner. They didn't know how, but when Vernon Cole, the quarterback, sent him out as a flanker, he was, like 10 or 12 yards from the line of scrimmage. Right. I mean, from his tight end. Yeah. All right. So now everybody on Tulsa's team, Tulsa had
Opie Bandit.
Had an All-American named Opie Bandit, who was a tackle, All-American tackle.
Yeah.
When North Texas lined up, Opie Bandit was right in front of Abner, but he was 2 yards behind him because Abner was in the backfield. But his eyes were on
right over
the defensive end and another lineman. All three of them, everybody knew they clued in on Abner. So I said, Vernon apparently going to run this ball himself. I know he's not going to throw the ball to Abner with 3 guys, including an All-American defensive tackle, playing him, keying on Abner. As soon as they got down, and Cole called for the pass. Now he didn't get under center in those days. Straight T was what everybody used, but he backed up about 5 yards from the center. And when he called for the snap, he got the ball. He just turned around to the direction that Abner was. Everybody knew he was going to throw the ball to Abner. Vernon threw that ball. Abner caught it just in front of his nose. The minute the ball hit there, the second the ball hit his hands, Opie Bandit was on him right here, and the other 2 linemen were right behind him, and they were reaching out for him. By the time he made his first step, all of them had their hands on him. Some kind of way, Abner ran and bowed his head and just kept running and did not stop until he was in the end zone. Now, according to the distance, it was a 2-yard run because they put you 2 yards from the extra point, but he had at least 3 yards behind the line.
Right. That's right.
So actually, the 2 yards was 5. I have seen him. I saw him make 5 touchdowns in high school one night. But that to me was the greatest run I ever saw him. It was only 2 yards, according to the record. But
but the odds were stacked against him.
The odds, man. Ain't nobody would have said, Abner, I'm his brother, and I'm saying he can't do that.
That's a sermon right there.
Oh, I've mentioned it in the sermon.
Before you go, I don't know how I got here and how I met Abner, but I've answered some kind of call. I don't know what that call is.
Well, just keep listening.
Say a little prayer for us that we continue to follow.
All right, because I'm going to have to go.
Okay.
Our God and our Savior, how blessed we are to be in this world and to have life, and our good minds are rational, and our health, we thank you for. And the profession and the work that is being carried on will encourage and give inspiration to thousands of people as they see what another ordinary human being can do with God's help and his ability. We thank you for what you've done and for how this is going to turn out. We expect it to be miraculously beautiful. Thank you for what's already happened and for what's going to happen. In thy name, amen.